guys, so we're going to kick off. Welcome everybody to this evening's session, which is entitled Decoding Digital, Lessons from Industry. We're going to be talking about digital transformation in manufacturing. We have a panel of industry experts, and we're going to move through a couple of topics in relation to digital transformation and get some input and some insights from the various expertise that we have with us this evening. So maybe just to start by saying welcome everybody, welcome to the panel, and maybe if we just move around and if each panel member could introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about your organization, where you're coming from, a little bit about your background, that'd be really helpful. So maybe I might start with you, Barry, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dan. Thanks for the introduction. Barry Curry is my name. I work for a company called System E. We specialize in the design and implementation of manufacturing systems and the project management of those, primarily in life sciences, but in general manufacturing. And we've been working on digital transformation in various guises for the past almost 20 years, and recently collaborated with Tangent in Trinity College to design and deliver the course on digital transformation for manufacturing.
Super, thanks, Barry. And Oisín.
Yeah, hi Dan, thanks very much. So Oisín Curran is my name. I'm CEO with a company called Odyssey VC. So we're a company that specializes in compliance related to digital transformation technologies focused on the life sciences sector. So myself and Barry know each other a long time as well. So yeah, we see a lot of challenges again in how digital can really transform business when you're talking about the impact from a compliance perspective on patient safety and product quality related to the medicines and that we all take on a day-to-day basis. So it's a really interesting space because it's a bit of a laggard in terms of digital transformation. So that's the spot where we are, and we have a particular kind of enabler product that we're really trying to focus on enabling digital transformation for cloud-based technologies in this space and compliantcloud.com. And so it's a really interesting and rich space to be at the minute.
Fascinating, absolutely. Thanks, Oisín. Thank you for that. Gavin.
Hi folks, Gavin Smith. I'm a digital business solutions lead at a company called Vision ID. So we're an Indigenous Irish company, 21 years in business. I've been in the business for just shy of 10 years now. So we primarily focus on the manufacturing vertical with a core, I suppose, expertise in life sciences manufacturing. So I suppose our solution set really is at the core of a lot of the digital transformation initiatives undertaken by our client base, primarily around the area of kind of data capture. So removal of paper-based systems, manual systems, etc. And the introduction of digital technology to essentially drive more efficient processes. So I attended the course, Life Sciences course delivered by Tangent by Barry and Derval over last year, obviously, and into this year as well. So excited to be here, obviously, as part of the session. Yeah.
Super. Thanks very much, Gavin. And my name is Dan Rogers. I'm head of education in Tangent, responsibility for strategy and sustainability of the education programs within the Tangent education function of the innovation entrepreneurship unit that is in Trinity. So we deliver programs at undergraduate, postgraduate, academic and executive level with the broad themes of innovation and entrepreneurship running throughout those programs. So I'll be moderating the discussion this evening, and we'll take any questions from attendees. If anybody would like to put a question in the chat, I'll ensure we feed that back to the panel and we'll try and answer it there and then. If not, people should feel free to contact us after in relation to the course via the Tangent website, and we'll leave some information about that in the chat so people can get in touch. Okay, so maybe to kick off then, we might start with kind of get us going with sort of a broad question really. Maybe you could have a think and comment on what are the trends that you guys see from your perspectives within your organizations, within the sector, in terms of digital. What are you seeing kind of coming down the track in terms of digital transformation? Maybe I might come to yourself, Oisín. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can jump in that. So, I mean, from our perspective, and I suppose part of the genesis of what Odyssey is doing and what we're trying to enable, which is to answer your question, Dan, is people are talking about digital transformation and how that's going to change how they run their business, but what does it actually mean? In a lot of cases, you're talking about the basic digitalization of manual processes at some of the most basic stages, right? And again, digital transformation as a term can be quite an attractive term. It's strategic. It's caught out in a lot of kind of strategic business plans and business goals. Digital transformation, let's adopt digital. But I think what you're seeing is from a technology readiness level, you're talking different companies tend to be at different stages in that life cycle. So there's one key thing we see is the integration of business processes for sure, right? So there's a lot of independent standalone business processes and people are looking to gather and centralize data initially with a view to doing something. I think the second thing, which is quite interesting is, and this is particular to our vertical in life sciences, which I think Gavin and Barry might be able to talk to as well, is a very conservative segment, very, very conservative because of regulatory concerns, of course. But interestingly, we find that even from the point of view of the largest kind of the Fortune 500s, we do a lot of business with the large guys as well as startups. And they're actually now looking to different verticals for innovative technologies that are not traditionally in that space. They're looking for cost efficiency. They're looking for speed to market, speed to value, and they're looking at ways to adopt that. So it fits into a digital transformation strategy, but it's interesting to see that you have literally the full range of people who are looking to remove paper-based processes initially, digitize them. Then once you do that, they're looking to see how they can centralize and manage that data for efficiency or for insights into business. And then they're obviously looking at new tools, more specific tools. So I think part of the thing I find interesting is the incumbents, the big software players in that market are actually being slightly threatened these days. And I know a lot of people, for example, in the SAP business, and how they're pivoting their business model to cloud first and trying to figure out how they can modularize their solution because it's traditionally a very heavy solution. So yeah, it's broad, but I'm again for vertical that we focus on in life sciences in particular, compliant use cases and business processes in that space. Just a real appetite to adopt new solutions, innovate, think of different ways of doing business, get better value out of business, and ultimately to try and maintain their position in the market. And they've been driven by market forces in these cases to try and get more effective medicines to people who need them. And I think that's an admirable piece, I suppose, of the somewhat obscure side of digital transformation as a topic.
Absolutely, and to somebody like me, Oisín, I often get surprised when I hear that there are organizations that are still paper-based and that removing those sort of paper-based solutions need to be a priority for these organizations. Why do you think that has taken so much time?
It's kind of hard to tell. So interestingly, we were just doing a webinar ourselves last week on this particular issue, and there's an issue around quality risk management when it comes to this particular sector, right? So it depends on who's driving the initiative, right? Firstly, the impact of digital in terms of it going wrong or any process, forget about digital, is significant in that space. When you're talking about product contact and product related processes. So some cases I suppose there's a paralysis around change because we know what we've done has passed audits, for example. Let's keep it as it is. If we introduce new tools, it's new skills, it's new ways of doing business. And in a lot of cases, people have looked for the regulatory bodies to give them some direction on what that should look like for them to adopt tools. You also have a skills gap. So it's great what you guys are doing in Tangent to try and bring in knowledge around what this is to try and give people the skills to say, look, it's not an insurmountable task. Yes, it's about understanding what the business needs, and the business needs compliance as well. So I think, like even today, I was talking to large global company, 90,000 headcount worldwide, multi-billion-dollar business, and they're saying, yeah, we really need to talk to you guys about removing paper. You know what I mean? So it's everywhere. So I think again, it's particular to us is looking at compliance. Compliance tends to be a little bit of a black box operation that people are afraid to change because of the potential impact on the business as a whole. But I do see that changing a lot, which is great,
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. So a paralysis around change is causing, I suppose, a delay in the digital transformation happening in some of these organizations, but there's an understanding that it needs to happen.
Exactly.
Gavin, could you maybe give us your insights there? What sort of trends are you seeing? Are they similar to Oisín? Anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, very similar, I suppose, to some of the points made by Oisín. I suppose from an end user's perspective, you could probably see why there's a bit of, I suppose, obscurity maybe, or lack of understanding of the potential of digital technologies in terms of operational efficiencies, because in many cases it has been used as a branding exercise by us, the vendors, to some extent. I'm not sure if there's pretty much any vendors in the market not referencing in some shape or form digital transformation. So then from an end user's perspective, it can get quite confusing, diluted, if you want to call it that, in terms of what are the real tangible benefits that you can get out of adopting digital technology. So for us, I suppose it's very concrete. And again, to echo what Oisín has said, we've spent the last 20 years trying, I suppose, in terms of advocating the removal, obviously, of the likes of your paper-based processes, the removal of, I suppose, the human interaction to the greatest extent possible, because ultimately that, in many instances from a manufacturing perspective, is the single source, or one of the largest source of errors in terms of human error, right? And that's just a reality. So digital obviously offers the opportunity to automate those type of processes, whether it be paper or manual based. And I think there's definitely, I suppose, an acknowledgement in terms of our kind of core clients that it's now pretty much a business necessity as opposed to a nice to have, in terms of having a defined digital strategy, or at least some class of a roadmap towards digital innovation. Whereas going back kind of 4 or 5 years, there were some companies at the leading edge of adopting digital, whereas now it's very much a business necessity, I suppose, to maintain competitiveness, really, that in terms of that operational efficiency gain. And I think it's actually something that Barry and Derval touched on in the course, that the benefits realization piece, I think, is absolutely crucial. Ultimately, as a vendor in this space, what you're always trying to adopt is a value-driven approach to technology. I think that's just so crucial, because I suppose the core focus in terms of kind of forward-thinking, more speculative type of projects, it has to be ultimately around the business value that it drives. We've seen technology adopted for the sake of it, and ultimately that leads to, I suppose, pretty much a dead end from an end user standpoint. Everything really has to start with that business pain point, that business value potentially that you can drive, and then ultimately aligning a technology to potentially solve a business case or solve that challenge. So, and definitely I'm seeing that in the market more of I suppose, a challenge from our clients to say, look, what is the benefits realization, or the value ultimately of adopting technology A, B, or C. So I think that's crucial, and there's definitely a more, I suppose, reasoned approach to digital adoption, as previously, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, clients didn't really know where to start. There's a lot of different variations in terms of, as per Oisín's point, what digital transformation meant for different vendors. But ultimately, I think clients are now coming to us with a more concrete strategy and their view, I suppose, of what digital transformation is, and then ultimately challenging us as vendors to apply technologies to solve their business pain points. So yeah, benefit realization is certainly something that I've seen top of the agenda, I would have said, in the last kind of 6 to 12 months with our client base. Yeah.
Really interesting. And looking at the pain points, where the pain points exist, and that value-driven approach. So, I mean, just to pick up, we've got a question that's come in on the chat specifically around SMEs, how they can become more digital friendly, because as Oisín pointed out, that there can be conservatism in some certain organizations, and maybe a reluctance to change. Barry, is that something you comment on?
Yeah, I think so. Like, it's something we come across a lot in terms of there's almost not so much of a fear of technology, but a fear of the amount of understanding you need to have of technology. And what we try and focus people on is leveraging the benefits of the technology without being an expert to get in and do the hard coding and the programming. You know, there are a lot of, I suppose, a lot of terminology thrown at people these days, and there's a lot of, you know, very highly skilled companies out there who have all the technical experts. And I'd always encourage and particularly SMEs, to try and understand what can the technology do for you, as opposed to trying to become an expert on the technology. And, you know, looking at supports around, like, only today we were talking to someone, and to realize, when you go looking at the Enterprise Ireland, for example, or your local enterprise office as a small business, the amount of supports that are available, and you look at companies like the organizations like the skills nets and the ICBE and so on, and what they can do for you as a small organization can really set you on that path to get in the zone of understanding, you know, what digital roadmap will work for us. Because I spent a lot of time over the years, and Gavin alluded to it there, as did Usheen, where you know, everyone was jumping on the bandwagon quick. We've got to replace this, implement a system, and some clients ended up breaking the corners off their business processes to fit a technical solution. But it's very important. Everyone wants to jump in and get the technology installed. We spend a lot of time with clients up front, spending a lot of time understanding the requirements and understanding the benefits and going after them in a very polarized way. So when the technology is chosen, there's a huge amount of thought gone into it, not just a quick fix solution, but what will this do for us in the long term, and how will it enable future technological enhancements? So you're laying the groundwork. Don't be too eager to just jump in and try and do everything at once. So from the SME question, I'd say, you know, talk to the skills nets. ICBE is an excellent skill net. Talk to your enterprise office and engage with Tangent as well in terms of the supports and technology available. And remember that there's, you know, even some of the funding that's available with these organizations, they're doing a lot of great work, and it's not advertised enough, I think, you know, and particularly for SMEs.
I'd like to pick up on a point that came up earlier, which is digital transformation can mean different things potentially in different sectors. So I'll just put the question to the panel. Can we boil it down? You mentioned, Barry, everyone wants to kind of jump in with the technology, and certainly that's the kind of association I would have with digital transformation, is the technological advance or transformation in the technological sense. But there's a lot more to it than that. So is there one size fits all in terms of a definition, or does it depend on the sectors that we're working within?
I'll take that one from my own perspective, and again, I am totally open to being completely corrected on this, right? But when you think about digital transformation, for me, firstly, the key for me is in the digital piece, right? So it is a digital process, it's a digital activity. But again, like the guys are saying, not just for the sake of digital, it's for a particular reason. But we generally, in terms of a readiness level, we look at it from, because we see clients, as I said, you know, Fortune 500 companies who are at the paper-based end, right, who are doing digital transformation, which is, you know, replacing manual-based processes with digital versions initially. And what Gavin said is bang on there. We see in our vertical the largest amount of errors, human-based errors associated with paper, but it's maintained for all sorts of reasons, which is a topic in itself. But the digital transformation could also be replacing legacy systems with newer versions of it, working towards, which again is another kind of sexy term, towards the big data. We're talking AI, VR, we're talking about all those things at the far end. And sometimes I think people get blinded by that because they see people going around manufacturing plants with augmented reality and they say, that's great. How do we do that? And I remember I was in one plant where we were assessing for technology readiness level for the adoption of AR. And I remember we were doing a walk of the plant, and I was walking past some of the operators, and they were pressing buttons for part of the process. It was all pneumatics, all standalone pneumatics, nothing connected to anything else. And I'm like, you know, you've probably got some more issues that are more important than augmented reality in those cases. But again, I think it's just because, you know, it's a strategy. And as the guys are saying, it's like, let's put in some technology as part of a digital transformation. But in the roundabout way, for me, digital is the first part. So it's a conversion to digital, and it's either a conversion from manual to digital or a replacement with legacy systems with newer, more appropriate versions of that. But it's at a business level, again, you know, the digital transformation piece is just more of a business enabler to me. And I think whenever we're talking to our customers, it's really, as the guys reiterated there, it's not about let's do digital transformation for the sake of it. It's let's do it for the business need. And I think that's the piece where digital transformation is not just digital transformation, it's business transformation, really. You know?
Yeah. And maybe just to pick up on that point, so the business need, can we drill down there? So if we were to look at the key drivers behind the need for digital transformation, what are they specifically? Can we be more specific about that? Gavin,
well, I'll
do you?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No. I let Gavin jump in there. Sorry.
Yeah, I'd say so much of it really does focus on operational efficiencies and the ability to quantify, I suppose, the current state, and then ultimately what would the potential desired state be should a digital technology platform, whether it be hardware, software, etc., be adopted. I mean, that's the core focus, and ultimately presenting that back to the business in a coherent fashion to say that, look, our current state is at a cost of X from an operational standpoint. The desired state could potentially improve efficiencies, whatever those KPIs might be based on the process that you're dealing with, by defined percentages, and getting that, I suppose, objective view of what potentially digital can achieve, as opposed to a lot of the kind of subjective, as I said, again, the kind of branding exercises that are out there, really defining it as an objective desired outcome to the business, what potentially can it drive in terms of cold, hard, direct benefits to the business. That's the critical piece, I'd say, to any sort of initial journey in terms of justification to the business, because ultimately the high level stakeholders want to see that. I suppose there's probably the biggest challenge to digital transformation is the business as usual mindset. If we're currently completing a process as it is and it's fine and it's working, why change? So ultimately, as a vendor, again, you're trying to empower your, I suppose, clients with the objective data to say, look, from a desired state perspective, we could potentially be doing this in a far more efficient way if we adopt a particular digital strategy to overcome them. But really, it is those operational efficiencies, those key KPIs that I suppose the process specialists are challenged on a daily basis. That's I suppose, the nuts and bolts of where we would look to drive the kind of efficiency discussions, you know.
Can you guys hear me still?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you, Daniel.
Sorry, just the headphones there, Bluetooth. I thought it was failing me. Very good. So yeah, so I suppose on that, I'm thinking of like an organization that knows it needs to upskill in terms of digital transformation, is looking for a first kind of step. What is that first step? Because digital transformation, I imagine, for an organization that's at the very beginning, it can seem overwhelming. It can seem like a big outlay and investment. So where do you start, Barry? Maybe I'll come to you on that.
No, it's a fair comment, and this is something we face all the time because, you know, we're dealing with a company at the moment. They're in renewable energy, and they're doing deals with power companies all over the world on their form of renewable energy, and they know they have to scale up production for the next 5 years when legislation comes in. So their said was, where do we start? What do we do? Because you're trying to, one, keep the business moving, two, lay the platform for the future, and introduce some efficiencies and benefits that will be recognized and secure more investment. So you're this constant balancing act. And when you look at specifically a manufacturing organization, and if you can pick an area of the business where you can clearly see a process end to end in a contained way, it will give you benefit, but not introduce too much risk. And it's going to be different for each manufacturer. But if you look at something like you know, laboratory logbooks, equipment logbooks, for example, maintenance logs, that kind of thing, where they support the manufacturing process, but they're not directly in the middle of it. So if it went wrong, it's a very easy thing to mitigate. It wouldn't impact the process. But if you could implement that, then you get a process end to end of requirements gathering, prototyping, testing. You qualify it for use, and you have a proof of concept. And I'd also, you know, dig from within your team as well, because the best ideas and the best knowledge of how your business runs and the inefficiencies in your business come from the people actually on the factory floor, carrying the pieces of paper from here, there, and everywhere, and managing it. That's where we've seen the best ideas come from. And if you can nurture that, start in a you know, an area that will give you benefit but not too much risk, and then, you know, once you see the benefit of that, and then roll that out on a larger scale, piece by piece, across the organization, that's where you get people's buy-in, you get their support, you get their understanding, you get some advocates of digital. And once you get advocates in different departments, then it spreads, and it's almost addictive. Once people see, because the output of digital is normally data, and the data you use to make decisions, to make better decisions, quicker decisions. And it almost becomes addictive for people. Once they see what data is available from processes, they tend to, oh, if we can get this, can we get that? And they start ask for more and more. And they will almost define their own solution by understanding what they need. In some cases, there's some great examples in industry of data-driven discussions. And I know that the organization Nestle, obviously large coffee processor and manufacturer, that the first item when they're building a new factory, they try and understand the data footprint of that factory. What data will we need to run this factory and drive this factory? And they work backwards and they look at the market. If you think of the traditional way, you build a factory, you produce a product and you create data, they actually work backwards. And they're one of the most successful organizations in the world at adopting this digital method, because they're starting at the very end in terms of what decisions will we need to run this factory correctly? Therefore, what data do we need? Where does that data come from? Tracing that back to the equipment and bringing it in that way. So it's going to be different for every organization. If it's a new factory, if it's an existing factory, but generally start small, finish a project end to end, learn from it, and then build on that. And it's going to be slightly different for everyone, but the maintenance logbooks, equipment logbooks, laboratory logbooks are a great place to start.
Yeah, very good. And a question coming in the chat there that sometimes within the SME sector, sometimes CEOs are maybe not as trusting of digital as they could be. Is there any particular advice you would have in terms of how somebody might make a business case to their SME CEO for digital transformation? Would it be using kind of case studies or examples of where it's been successful in the past, or in similar kinds of organizations, or what would be the kind of key sort of tool to persuade, I suppose, and show evidence that this has been successful?
I guess I'll just talk briefly again. It's normally a multi-pronged approach. It depends on what problem you're trying to resolve. First of all, I would always talk to users of the technology in a similar industry. You'll find that, even people that might seem like your competition, they're more than willing to talk about, wins that they've had through the adoption of technology without giving away the company secrets. So I talk to peers in industry. I try and understand the issue you're trying to resolve, and is technology the actual enabler here? Using some very simple calculations, and we run through these in the course in terms of when you take a piece of paper out of an operation, what's the cost of having that paper in your operation? Removing it, there's the management of the paper can go missing, and you have incorrect entries, handwritten, that need to be clarified. There's huge cost associated with that. So when you project that cost out over a year, how many hours work do you save doing that? So it's the cost benefit analysis, it's talking to the peers, but above all, it's trying to understand what problem you're trying to resolve, and is the technology that's out there the right solution? There's a technology solution for every problem you can come across anywhere at the moment, and you can see that whether it's an application or whether it's, we mentioned AR and VR there and so on, and they all have specific uses, but they also come with an overhead, and that's what people are cognizant of. But if you know the overhead in advance, you can plan that and engage the business to understand the impact of managing that. Because when you replace a paper process, an electronic process, the electronic process still needs to be managed, it still needs to be owned, it still needs to be maintained. And it's trying to understand that. In a smaller organization, it's difficult. A matter of trust is, again, a small example on a small scale, to try and prove if this can help us. The technology vendors out there are more than willing to help you with prototypes and that kind of thing, and demos. And I'd engage, there's manufacturing technology fairs and events. Most of them are coming back face to face now. They were largely virtual for the last 2 years. Manufacturing supply chain exhibition in the RDS next month as well. So there's lots of stuff there,
Sure. And I've included, obviously, in the discussion, the chat function there, the link to the course. So obviously that's a great first step, and a great introduction and exposure to concepts associated with digital transformation, and also an excellent opportunity to engage with colleagues and peers within manufacturing who will be facing similar kinds of challenges. So the great opportunity for information exchange as well as new learning there. So over the last 18 months, I suppose we have seen businesses go digital in an unprecedented way in terms of people selling online, in terms of, certainly from my own perspective, education moving online in its entirety for a period of time. So I'm interested to know how COVID-19, how the pandemic has influenced digital transformation. Has it accelerated it? Has it presented additional challenges? What sort of things has the pandemic thrown up for digital transformation?
Well, I suppose from our perspective, we've certainly seen a drive towards technology that enables remote, what we would classify as remote enablement technology. So assisted reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, etc. So, I mean, it went from well down our own kind of go-to-market planning, essentially to the number one point of topic over the course of a couple of weeks at the start of the pandemic. Basically, essentially, as our clients look to pivot from obviously being fully on-site to having upward of 50, 60% of people off-site. So they look to technology, obviously, to address that challenge of restricted site access. So we had one particular pharma company that was actually actively in the process of completing an FAT with a vendor over in Italy. So obviously, you'll all remember at the start of COVID, that was very much the epicenter of the initial surge. So travel to the supplier site was a complete non-runner. So they essentially engaged with us to see, look, what kind of technology, digital-based technology that you guys have that could potentially solve what is a major business pain point. And again, I suppose devising an augmented reality, virtual reality type of solution for that particular pharma company was a complete win for them in terms of not only the short term, I suppose, getting over the short term restrictions, but longer term completely changed the way in which they would think about completing the likes of their FAT processes, whereby the traditional method was obviously send an engineering team to sites across the world, and obviously there's overheads and costs associated with that. So, but again, prior to COVID, very limited engagement, I would have said, in the market in terms of that kind of space, but literally overnight, over the course of a couple of weeks, that all of a sudden became a very tangible, plausible, I suppose, technology adoption from our side. So, and again, I think you're absolutely right, Dan, to kind of put the question out there. It's certainly advanced in our space technology, I'd say 4 by 4 or 5 years potentially. Some of the technology we would classify as not being maybe even enterprise ready, all of a sudden we were getting active inquiries about potential projects from clients in that kind of space. So yeah, certainly in our perspective, a real surge on the back of, I suppose, some of the challenges that the restricted site access posed to our client base, you know.
And would that be similar for yourself, Oisín?
Yeah, I suppose that there's a lot in that, and again, my perspective is polluted by a particular vertical, which is life sciences, and so I'll say that again, right? So I know it's not consistent, but the interesting thing for me is, and following on, just listening to what Barry was saying, like in terms of the ROI and how do you trigger these things? Again, it's a business need. So the one thing pre-COVID was status quo. There's no cost to that because it is what it is, right? There's a cost to us conducting change. In this case, with COVID, that was the business case. We can no longer conduct our business. We have no choice but to do something. So, I mean, your business value was right there, and I think the demand for new ways of doing things, it's still slightly slow to change the mindset, because you know you're doing the same thing, and again, in life sciences, as we all know, it's conditioned on repeatability, because that's how we manage variation, right? So if somebody's been doing the same thing consistently for 15 or 20 years, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, you can't do that anymore. It was difficult to try and figure out, as Gavin was saying, the thought of introducing, AR and VR into the execution of FATs was just unheard of, but now it just becomes a necessity for us to be able to carry on our business. So I think it definitely triggered the openness to new ideas, new concepts, innovation, new ways of doing things. And again, at the end of the day, like SMEs, like ourselves included, you're there trying to enable this, your particular niche within a given sector. But again, you just need that business driver. So I think that the great thing about it is, you know, from an SME's perspective, the highlight was really business continuity. You can't get to your office anymore as an SME. We need to maintain the business. We have to carry out business activities in a certain way, which requires a transformation in a lot of cases. How you deliver to your customer now changed as an SME, because you now needed to have a way of firstly getting to them digitally, which had a real driver around digital marketing. That entire business absolutely lit up. But then how you actually deliver services, deliver your product, that was changing in line with the customer. So I mean, I think, as Gavin's saying, I know you're probably being conservative there. It's accelerated by 4 to 5 years. Gavin, I think there's a lot of stuff across a lot of sectors just got really condensed into a 12-month period that could have taken us decades, you know.
Mm-hmm. And I think just related but slightly separate, and picking up on a point that came in through the chat there, obviously we've seen significant compromises of digital systems nationally in the last kind of year. Has that brought about any hesitation or concerns? Have you seen anything in relation to that around digital transformation? Is cybersecurity something that comes up?
Yeah, I'll just quickly say something that from my side. So yeah, it's absolutely usually risk 1 or 2 from a business side is how do we handle our cyber risk. Again, it depends on the organization type. You know, not everybody is a target out there. It just, you may be by accident based on the services that you're using, and again, just high profile ones, as you mentioned. Dan, the other thing to keep in mind as well is cybersecurity is a threat even in the case of on-prem and the technology that you're managing in-house. And for most of the customers that we've dealt with over the last 20 years, they have never had the technical capability to manage cybersecurity on site effectively. Whereas large digital technology providers predominantly have the resources, they have the drive to manage that better than we do. So yes, you're exposed, but it's maybe not as much as you feel that you are, you know, if you were to manage it yourself. So yeah, it's absolutely up there. But again, it's an education thing. I think there are tools and services and processes to manage that, and in some cases, you're safer using an as a service model, for example. You know.
Yeah, it's a funny one because it always comes up, and as excuse me, as new technology comes on board, obviously, when you're trying to install that technology in a manufacturing setting or a corporate setting, there's a number of checks to go through, but there are also a number of avenues you can take. So for example, you may not be able to fit a particular device and connect it directly to your corporate networks, but using sort of cloud solutions, you can bypass that and bring them in a different way and make them compliant almost. You know, now you're still responsible. So it's just a different way of thinking. But I mean, most of the big cyber attacks were caused by, you know, I think it was people clicking on email links was the way in. You know, the actual securing servers and securing switches and networks is quite efficient. And, you know, even basic attacks on websites, and you'll see there's millions of attempts every day. We're all getting texts these days, phone calls. It's coming at us all angles, and I think education is the best way around that. That, as I said, the technology providers, obviously there are breaches from time to time, but if you consider the amount of attacks, the amount of breaches, it's minimal. You're only one attack away from a massive one, but I think there's some really fantastic work. I know of one organization to combat the email phishing, that they send their own hoax emails as training, and if you click on the wrong one, you have to be retrained in terms of, you know, not to click on them. So it's a great way of almost forearming people for what to expect and looking at the emails. So that's a big part of it. But generally the security is run quite well in most organizations, and then obviously when you put it out to the cloud specialists and security specialists, and you secure yourself even further, you know, in that way. But it's always top of the agenda. I mean, it's you know, it's there with everything we do. Even your phone, your own even home PC will have good protection there too, you know.
So I'd like to kind of maybe focus in a little bit on kind of something we mentioned earlier, is about that sort of first step. And obviously one of the steps that people can take is to go and training, and we do have a program in digital transformation in Tangent. Barry, that program obviously encompasses a number of aspects of digital transformation. It incorporates design thinking. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about the relationship between innovation and digital transformation, and how or why design thinking is important in that.
Yeah, and it's something I alluded to earlier, that technology has a lot of standard features that will do great stuff for you, but there's also some overhead to manage that maybe a non-value adoption. And what design thinking allows you to do in this space is to create your own solution. So we look at the problem first of all. What challenge are we trying to overcome here and in the business? And we literally get down to brass tacks to identifying that challenge in a very simple way, as refined as we can. We then, get the different SMEs from around the company, generally within your own organization, to say, well, what would work? Here's solution A, B, or C. Look at the enablers, but very much get people to create that solution and run a small kind of prototype in a very simple way. And that can be anything from, building a model of a production line with cardboard boxes to tape on the floor, to a more sophisticated kind of setup, but ultimately trying to prove the solution before you've made a decision on that solution. And design thinking and innovation moves in this way. Initially, 10 years ago, if you mentioned this in a manufacturing design capacity, they wouldn't really listen to you. But when we implemented a few systems and using the design thinking model in the requirements gathering phase, we didn't call it design thinking, we called it requirements gathering. We brought the client on board with us rather than bombard them with technology. Or terminology, excuse me. We just practically, got to where we needed to get from a requirements gathering perspective, from, trying to understand the enablers in the organization, the blockers. But key to that was bringing all the different departments on board. So you may think you're introducing just a technical solution in manufacturing. So we only need manufacturing and we only need the technology, the IT people, but you actually need your supply chain people, you need your finance people on board, you need your quality people, because every decision you make in manufacturing can affect the full supply chain. And using that design thinking mindset and bringing all the stakeholders on board and getting their pinch points out on the table, you avoid a lot of early noise, and you can get to the crux of where you need to go much faster. And there's numerous examples that we go through, but basically we allow people to create their own solution via this sort of practical projects that we give people to do, and to evaluate that before they've invested thousands of hours of time, or thousands of euros or whatever, in a very simple way, and like thinking about it and getting them to think to the very end of this solution, what would be the benefits, and how can this help us put something together and map it out on the wall, walk everyone through it, get everyone to challenge it in a very interactive way. And that's been so effective for us in getting clients to where they need to be. And that's what we try and, the whole course came out of seeing sort of digital transformation programs run badly for many, many years. And we tried to design a course to prevent those challenges from happening. And, Derval goes a lot into the design thinking space, and really helps people, as I say, generate their specific outcome for their plant. Because even in a multinational making the same product, there are cultural differences, there are local differences, there are different types of equipment manufacturing the same product, and they all need a slightly different solution sometimes. And that's what design thinking facilitates.
Sure. Thanks, Barry. And just another question to you, Barry. So as the program designer, the digital transformation program designer, what sort of profile of applicants would you deem most suitable for that program?
Yes, a good question. And we thought about this a lot, because we were looking at the audience, and we were trying to understand the market there. And it's really anybody involved in a transformation project, that involves technology in the business and manufacturing. And whether they're at a senior level, whether they're at a hands-on engineering, project management, it's the whole plethora of people who will be involved and need to support a program like this. So it doesn't exclude. Initially, I know last year's was focused on life sciences manufacturing, but what we realized was that about 80% of the course was relevant to manufacturing in general. And we stood down, we looked at a lot of the material, and we spoke to a lot of different manufacturers, and we did surveys. We got a lot of good information and talking to different organizations, and many of the same challenges exist. So it's anyone involved in the management of technology or the transformation of technology within a manufacturing business will get something from it, you know.
And we're just at time, but Gavin, we're lucky to have you on the call as a past student and participant on the course. Is there anything that you could share with us, just as maybe a key takeaway that you found was of value when you participated on the program?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'd certainly describe it as the right balance of theory and probably practical application, as per Barry's point. And that's the critical piece, because again, I know DT has become so much of a branding exercise with kind of generic business value references, but the course certainly challenges participants to make it real, I would have said, in the context of digital transformation. So when it comes again to concepts like that, benefits realization, effective stakeholder management, these are all kind of core concepts that you're presented with through the course, and obviously challenged in terms of mapping out how you would actually deal with it in a real world scenario. And I think the design thinking approach then in terms of testing actually is something that really resonated with me. And I think it's a couple of the questions that some of our participants have come up with, like where to start. And I really like the design thinking approach in terms of their testing methodology, starting small, starting with a low commitment of resource in terms of proving a potential business case, and then looking to ultimately scale once you're confident that there's a potential output from a particular initiative, etc. So I really like the term effort versus reward, and ultimately is the effort that we're going to put into this digital transformation really going to result in, I suppose, a significant enough benefit to the business. So that's all kind of concepts that's covered in the course. So no, I certainly couldn't speak highly of it. Obviously very beneficial. I would have adopted an awful lot of the kind of core principles in terms of how I would engage a client since completing the course. So no, strongly would advise anybody that's, I suppose, maybe thinking about it to really get stuck in, because it's hugely beneficial. Yeah.
Super. Thanks very much, Gavin. Well, it's been a very, very interesting discussion. I've learned a lot this evening. I've learned a lot about digital transformation, particularly in the manufacturing sector, and the importance of it, and the ways in which we can kind of get involved in the return on investment. And I suppose anybody who's viewing this, an excellent first step would be to explore our program in Tangent. If you're interested, you can contact Jane.Flanagan at tcd.ie, who is our student recruitment officer. She'll be able to give you more information about the program. Also, tcd.ie /tangent, or Google TCD Tangent, and you'll find out more information about the digital transformation in manufacturing program, which is kicking off in January. So thank you so much, guys. That was a really interesting discussion. Really appreciate Oisín, Gavin and Barry coming online this evening and engaging in what is a very fascinating topic. So thank you very much, guys.
Thanks very much for the opportunity. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll conclude the session there. Thanks very much, guys. Have a good evening.
Thanks very much. Take care.
Thanks very much, everybody. Cheers. Bye-bye.